Hello, everyone. You're listening to Little Saturday Cars Live. How's everyone doing this weekend? You're listening to Little Saturday Cars Live, where you can get your relevant car news in under 30 minutes. Now we're going to go through the same schedule as usual, where we go over 3 to 4 stories and analyze them. But first, I'd like to thank one of our sponsors for this podcast, and again, it's CarLock. Now, if you're a data nerd like me, and if you want to know the ins and outs of your car, for example, the acceleration, where have you been the past week, and possibly increase your efficiency of your whereabouts and where you're going to, well, CarLock is for you. You can just simply go on their website, www.carlock.co, navigate through their website to see what they offer. I know Polar Bear SRT has used it. He specified what he likes and what he doesn't like about it, but if it's perfect for your application, then please contact them and tell them that we sent you. Okay, now back to the podcast. Now, one of the first stories I like to go over is the car loan debacle. Now, I mentioned this in my first or second podcast, and it's a really big topic now today, since a lot of these stories have been coming up in huge amounts. However, I like to revisit this topic because this story is a little bit different, and it specifies that some car dealerships are lying about the loaner's income. Now, I know some of you have been following this really closely, just like me, but however, to give you a good example, just recently or last December, that Car Nation in Middletown, Connecticut pleaded guilty in federal court in December to a charge related to giving false information about loan applicants to auto lenders. So this false information stems from income, of course. Now, a lot of speculators that study the economy really closely have symbolized this sort of transaction activity equivalent to the housing bubble in 2008, which I think to a certain extent it's false, because in 2008 with the homes and etc. and valuing people's income, houses are bigger assets than homes. So as a result of that, it's probably 1/10 of the scale of the 2008 bubble, which won't affect the economy as much, but it's sort of a concern. And it revisits the cycle of late economic prosperity, where a lot of the consumers that are able to afford this stuff are not really in the market anymore to buy cars. So as a result, the plan B for most of these places that focus on sales, and majority of the people that can't really afford the full cash amount of this, object or product, that they usually go to people who can't really afford the product. So that story is pretty self-explanatory, and I think one of the key facts to worry about is if your car is taking up more than 25 to even 30% of your income, that seems like a lot. So as a result, if you're one of these people, just the next time that someone asks you what you do for a living, just say that you work for Chrysler Bank or any of these creditors that you owe money to on these cars, because essentially at the end of the day, you can use that money to sort of invest or use it for emergencies. And there was this crazy statistic on, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, that asked various amounts of Americans that if you had a $400 emergency, were you able to afford it? And 70%, which is technically everybody, said no, they can't afford it, and it would leave them financially behind. So as a result of that, you're one accident away from being broke, and don't be that 70% and try to see the foreseeable risk of possible accidents or possible emergencies, and you'll do better than most people. Okay, on to the next story. So Lexus will introduce a hands-off driver assist on a car this year. It's 2020, of course. The Lexus president, forgive me if I pronounce his name wrong, fucking Japanese name, Mr. Soto, whatever, speaks to Automotive News Europe and said that the company will launch a hands-off driver assistance on a car unrevealed this year. And the vehicle will be able to automatically change lanes and pass vehicles on the highway, and it will also support over-the-air updates for potential upgrades to level 3 autonomy. So I'm not really familiar with the driver assistance once it mentions level 3 autonomy, but I'm pretty sure that what Lexus is trying to do now is that they're trying to be ahead or be a part of the curve of driver assistance to where robots take over and human error is gone. Well, not human error, but I guess robots can make human error if you incorporate AI intelligence, because in order for the machine to learn itself, it needs to create mistakes. So if you're driving this car, then consider yourself a guinea pig, because if a mistake happens, then you're essentially a product of the company's data. So when I was looking over this hands-off driver assist, or whatever the market department decided to name it as, it sounds like a system that Cadillac has used or is using for their current cars for their hands-off Super Cruise driver assist. I think they're using it for their cars. I'm not sure. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Which was recently upgraded to enable the drivers in the Cadillac vehicles to automatically change lanes. So in this department, it just looks like Lexus is trying to catch up. They first introduced this type of technology for the LS concept in 2017, but from my understanding of this story, the president has specified that it all started with the level 2 autonomy, which can only support hands-off features. So I guess the car can drive by itself. So I would assume this level 3 autonomy, as it's specified, it's hands-off, driver assistant, lane changing. It can do whatever it needs to do on the highway, and there you go. So Audi in the past has offered a level 3 traffic jam pilot for its aid, which I think 90% of people can't really afford. It's like I think it's a $120,000 car, or a six-figure car at least. But however, it wasn't approved to be used to the consumer because of regulations, which for this story it doesn't really specify on it, but I would assume that ever since people have been dying from this type of technology, that government has decided to step in and create regulations to limit this technology, which I think it's another discussion on its own and doesn't have time for discussion on this podcast. But it's very subjective on what you think about this technology. If it's the Armageddon, we're all doomed, and if AI has the capability of driving us off of the road and killing it. Like, I'm going through conspiracies, but you know what I mean. So on to the next story, and that story was pretty self-explanatory as well. There's not really a lot of relevant car news, like huge car news, such as releases or whatever, just updates and just studies and a bunch of other things. So on to the next story. So the F-150 dominates top new/used sales by state. And this is not really surprising, since Ford decided to decommission, I think, around 60% of their lineup and predominantly focus on their F-150 and Mustang sales, which is technically Ford now, and everything else seems to be here and there and just there. I think in general for car companies such as Ford, Chrysler, anyone else in this space, two cars really define you as a car company, and Ford is a perfect example for the F-150 and Mustang. So the story has been said, if you have been living under the rock since the 1970s, then you don't know how much this truck has sold. And I think it's said, or another source has said, that the F-150 is like the best-selling truck in history, most probably. That's how crazy it is. And, like competitors such as Chevy, which the pickup truck is the top-selling new vehicle in 9 states, and the GMC Sierra 1500 and Toyota Tacoma each lead in 1. The F-150 is sort of eating everyone's lunch in this space. To further summarize, statisticians at iSeeCars.com, a website that lists millions of new cars And used cars for sale crunched the numbers, and they estimated that 10.9 million new vehicles were sold in 2019 and 8.9 million used vehicles sold in the model years of 2014 and 2018. So that is a lot. That really is a lot. And among used vehicles, the Equinox is the top seller for 4 states. The RAV4 and the Nissan Rogue, 2 apiece, and the CRV is around 1. So, geez. Let's give Ford a golf clap because they officially did something right since the 1970s, which is crazy because realizing that the F-150 is the top selling new vehicle in 20 of the 50 largest metropolitan areas and 22 of the states is another, that's crazy. These are crazy numbers that Ford should be happy about, but they're not really doing so hot because you can tell they're running out of ideas with that godforsaken Mach-E Mustang electric truck, which I've expressed my opinions on it and I'm not really a fan of. However, on to the next story, and this is the last story before we do Song of the Week, that if you live in a major city such as New York City, Atlanta, Los Angeles, there are a lot of rats around, and rats can really devour your car. For one case, an individual that lives in California, I believe, had $2,500 in damages to his Honda Civic, which I think the rats were doing him a favor, and $9,300 to his wife's Hyundai Sonata. So these rats are pretty smart once it comes to which cars to destroy because they're essentially doing these people a favor, but no, they don't realize it, So that's the stupidity on the owner's part. They should probably get something more appealing than those 2 cars. But rats, if you leave your car outside for too long and if you're in those demographics, then rats can chew through wires. They can basically live in your car, and it's just disgusting and crazy. But what's even more crazy is the person who came upon these circumstances was actually someone who works in politics, and he declined an interview, and he doesn't want his name to be searched up in accordance to rats, which I think it's funny on its own. So let's try to figure out who this is and try to bring him to light. So this story is sort of to give awareness of if you just leave your car out. I don't even the article hasn't even specified how long this politician has left his car out. Probably a while because rats can, they don't just huddle in cars by mistake. They huddle in something that's stationary and has been there for a while. So who knows how long this person has kept his car in the same spot for. So that's it for the stories. We're going to cut it short again this week because there's not really a lot of news out, but I just want to keep this podcast consistent. So on to Song of the Week. Now I promise I was going to pick hip hop, but that's probably going to be next week. One of the songs I think everyone should listen to and has that good experimental funky beat to it, I guess if you want to call it, is the band Rush. And in particular, one of their top songs, Tom Sawyer, is I think is a good craft on its own with that same experimental sound theme that Pink Floyd has to offer, such as Dark Side of the Moon and a bunch of other albums that Pink Floyd has developed. And this type of music should be appreciated on its own because it has, I think, influenced a lot of modern artists in a way to sort of attack music in a different way of being experimental, being your own craft, and these people are the best examples of it with classic rock and their time. So of course they were ahead of their time and they were thinking outside of the box. So go ahead, listen to Tom Sawyer by Rush, and I hope everyone has a good weekend, and thank you for listening to this podcast. Yet again, we're here every Saturday, so if you have comments, questions, or concerns, or any way you want this to be longer than just want it to not just be news but want to be something else, then please email me or send me a DM on the Dysfunctional Podcast Instagram. So the email is dysfunctionalpodcastmailing@gmail.com, and our Instagram is _dysfunctional_podcast. So thank you for listening again, and we'll see you next Saturday.